I cheated on my husband, and after the divorce, I enjoyed my life. But now, seeing him married with a daughter, I regret everything. I never thought I would write something like this, but I'm doing it with the hope that someone in the same situation I was in can avoid making the same mistakes. I'm not looking for excuses, nor do I want to justify myself. I know what I did was wrong, and I lost the most valuable thing I had through a stupid decision. My story begins when I met Matthew in elementary school. From the time we were children, I knew he was different from the others. He wasn't the typical troublemaker or the boy who tried to make himself the center of attention, but he was always there to help whoever needed it. With me in particular, he was always especially attentive, making sure I was okay. Over time, we became inseparable. And although I didn't say it at the time, I always knew that if I ever had a serious relationship, I wanted it to be with him. When he asked me to be his girlfriend, I couldn't believe it. I had dreamed of that moment, but never thought it would actually happen. I said yes without thinking twice, and it was like living in a fairy tale. Throughout high school, everyone saw us as the perfect couple. They envied our relationship, and I felt fortunate. Time passed, and we stayed together through college. While many of our friends ended relationships and went through dramatic breakups, we remained solid. Matthew was always a reliable, stable man, someone I could depend on without fear. In my eyes, he was the ideal man. When he proposed to me after graduation, I didn't hesitate to accept. I felt that was what I was supposed to do. We got married shortly after turning 22, and for a while, everything was perfect. We had our own apartment, stable jobs, and the life that any couple would wish for. At that moment, I thought I had achieved everything I needed to be happy. But only a year later, something changed. It was after a conversation with my friends that I realized my life was no longer the same. While they talked about parties, spontaneous trips, and new experiences, I could only talk about my home, what I had cooked that week, how I had organized the apartment, or how work was going. It's not that Matthew forced me to do anything. He never imposed a role on me or made me feel trapped. But the reality was that, without realizing it, I had become one of those women who only lived for their husbands. My friends began to point out the differences. Rachel, who never got married, always called us boring and made fun of the fact that our conversations now revolved around responsibilities, while she was still living carefree, enjoying the freedom of going out with whoever she wanted. My other friends, Jessica and Emily, had partners but weren't married yet, so they were still in the stage of going out, having fun, and making plans without many restrictions. I was the only one who had already crossed that line. I ignored the first comments, but little by little they began to stay in my head. Had I made a mistake getting married so young? Had I given up my independence too soon? The worst part was that I didn't have a clear answer. By the third year of marriage, my frustration had grown. Matthew never changed. He was always the same attentive, loving man as always. But I started to feel suffocated. Every day seemed the same as the one before. We came home from work, talked while cooking dinner, watched something on TV, and went to sleep. The routine was suffocating me. Even though I genuinely enjoyed our time together, it seemed different from what I thought I should be experiencing at my age. What finally pushed me into crisis was when Matthew mentioned that he wanted us to have children. For him, it was the next natural step. We were stable, had a good home, and got along well. But when I heard those words, something inside me broke. I imagined myself in a few years, completely dedicated to a child, and I felt like I was aging suddenly. That same night, I talked to my friends about it, and their answers were exactly what I wanted to hear. Rachel laughed and told me that if I had a child, my life would completely end, that no one would see me as a woman anymore, only as a mother. Jessica commented that maybe I was still in time to have a little fun before taking that step. Emily was more moderate and told me not to rush, to enjoy my youth. And although I didn't want to admit it at the time, I had already made a decision. I was going to recover that part of my life that I felt I had lost. From that moment on, I started going out more with my friends. I did it with the excuse that I needed to distract myself, that there was nothing wrong with going out from time to time. Matthew never said anything, because he always trusted me completely. Every time I told him I was going out with the girls, he smiled and told me to have a good time. He never checked my phone, never asked uncomfortable questions, never gave me a reason to doubt his love. But I wasn't just looking for distraction. What I wanted was to feel young again, to feel that I still had options, that my life wasn't completely defined. The first time it happened wasn't even planned. We were at a bar celebrating Rachel's birthday. I had been going out with them more and more often for months, getting used to the dynamics of long nights, drinks, and harmless flirting. But that night was different. There was a man at the bar who kept looking at me. He wasn't especially attractive, nor did he have anything that stood out. But what he did have was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Interest in me as a woman, not as a wife, not as a future mother, but as someone desirable. When he approached and started talking to me, I let myself go. I didn't mention that I was married. I didn't give him any clue about my real life. At some point in the conversation, without thinking, I took off my ring and put it in my purse. I wanted to feel free, even if it was just for that night. The rest was almost automatic. We drank, we laughed, and before I knew it, I was in his apartment. I had convinced myself that I was just recovering something that belonged to me, that it was nothing serious, that I was just enjoying the moment. But when I woke up the next day with the hangover hitting me hard and seeing my wedding ring still in my bag, I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't come back from. The night before, I had turned off my cell phone so I wouldn't be bothered. I just wanted to disconnect from everything for a while. But that morning, seeing it there beside me, I realized I didn't want to see the messages or the missed calls. I didn't want to face reality. I stayed in that strange bed as the hangover came on strong. But stronger still was the shame. I had no idea how I had let everything get to that point, but it was too late. What was done was done. When I finally gathered the courage to leave, I didn't even look at the man sleeping next to me. I dressed in silence, grabbed my things, and left the apartment quietly. As I walked down the street with my head throbbing and my hands trembling, I could only think over and over that I had to act normal. I would get home, take a shower, change, and go to work like any other day. I would act as if nothing had happened. With luck, Matthew would have already left for work, and at night I would give him some excuse. But when I arrived, my whole plan fell apart in an instant. Matthew was there, waiting for me in the living room. My heart jumped. His eyes scanned me from head to toe. His expression was hard, full of something I had never seen before. He suspected. There was no trace of the affectionate man who always greeted me with a kiss or a smile. I tried to act natural. "I have to get ready for work," I said, trying to walk toward the bedroom. He stopped me cold. "Where were you?" "I went out with the girls," I stammered. "You turned off your cell phone all night." I didn't know what to answer. My mind was still clouded by the hangover and guilt, and I didn't react quickly enough. Matthew didn't take his eyes off me. His jaw was tense, his posture rigid. "Where were you?" he repeated louder. "Matthew, it's already late. I have to get ready." "Who were you with?" His voice was louder. My mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence said it all. I saw how his face changed, how his hands closed into fists at his sides. He took a step toward me, his voice low, trembling with contained fury. "Did you cheat on me?" Panic paralyzed me. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was dry and my mind couldn't form a coherent lie. "Answer me," he demanded. But I wasn't able to say anything, and that was my final mistake. Matthew let out a shaky breath and ran a hand through his hair as if trying to calm down, but his eyes burned with rage and pain. "You're a traitor." "It's not what you think," I managed to stammer, but it was too late. He shook his head with a humorless laugh, that bitter laugh of someone who has just lost everything he believed in. "Right. Don't bother trying to make up excuses. I know because you can't even look me in the eyes and tell me it doesn't exist." Tears began falling uncontrollably. I approached him and tried to grab his hand, but he pulled away as if I had burned him. "Matthew, please, forgive me. I don't know what I was thinking." "No." His voice was cold and sharp. "There's no going back. This is a line I will never be able to forgive." And without saying anything else, he walked out the door. The rest of the day was hell. I went to work as best I could, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. I barely ate or talked to anyone. I was just thinking about Matthew's expression, the pain on his face, what I had done to him. The following nights were even worse. Matthew never slept in the bedroom again. He stayed in the living room without speaking to me. When I tried to approach him, he ignored me completely. When I tried to touch him, he turned away coldly. After days of silence and unbearable emptiness, a week later I received the divorce papers at work. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until I couldn't anymore. I tried to talk to him. I begged him. I pleaded for us to go to therapy to try to fix things, to give me another chance. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this to me," was the last thing he said to me. The divorce was quick. We divided everything equally. The house was sold, each one kept their own car, and when everything was over, when we signed the last document, I realized that I hadn't just lost my husband. I had also lost my best friend. It was devastating. My friends tried to help me. They took me to parties and bars, introduced me to new people, and told me that I had to have fun, that I had to see the divorce as a second chance to enjoy life. And little by little, I began to believe it. Yes, I had made a mistake being unfaithful, but I had also made a mistake getting married so young. Maybe I wasn't destined for marriage. Maybe freedom was what I really needed, so I embraced my new life with determination. I stopped looking for serious relationships. I didn't want commitments. I didn't want to feel trapped again. I had many casual relationships, tried new experiences, experimented with open relationships and swinger parties, everything that in my marriage would have been unthinkable. In those years, 2 of my friends got married. Rachel never stopped making fun of them, saying they had surrendered to the system, that now they would only live for their husbands. We laughed and made jokes about how boring it must be to have the same partner every day. But something changed when Emily got pregnant shortly after her wedding. She began to pull away from us. At first, we tried to convince her that she didn't have to give up her social life, that she could still go out with us. But she no longer seemed interested. When we went out, she left early, never stayed late, didn't want to flirt with anyone or get into our conversations about men. We started calling her enslaved, saying that her husband and baby had trapped her, that she was no longer the same. We made fun of her, but she didn't seem to care. She looked calm. My other friend's story was completely different. Jessica, who got married just a few months after Emily, was unfaithful to her husband before the first year of marriage. At the time, I didn't see it as such a bad thing. After all, I had done the same. What surprised us was that her husband discovered it and divorced her immediately. We made fun of the situation and said that men nowadays couldn't stand anything, that they had no patience. We laughed about it, and Jessica continued with her life without regretting anything. But at some point, my own life began to feel repetitive. Work, home, eating alone, watching series before sleeping, and the feeling of emptiness, the feeling that something was wrong, that I was missing something. At first, I ignored it and told myself that it was okay, that the important thing was to enjoy my life as I wanted. But some nights, the silence was too strong and the bed too big. I couldn't help but feel that crushing loneliness that left me crying until I fell asleep. The only thing that kept me going was going out on weekends with my friends, but even those outings slowly began to lose their shine. Many years passed since I last heard anything about Matthew. After the divorce, I tried so hard to move forward with my life that I simply cut off any connection with the past. I had no idea what had become of him. I didn't know if he had remarried, if he had children, if he was happy. Sometimes on lonely nights, I wondered if he also regretted having left everything behind. I didn't have the answer, and honestly, I had convinced myself that I didn't need it. But then, just a few weeks ago, I received an invitation to the 15-year high school reunion. At first, I hesitated about going. I had lost contact with almost all my old friends. My life revolved around my work, outings with my friends, and my occasional encounters with men I barely remembered days later. But something inside me, perhaps curiosity or nostalgia, made me accept. When I arrived at the venue, I immediately realized that the atmosphere was very different from what I remembered. The conversations no longer revolved around parties and crazy trips or anecdotes about drunkenness. Now everyone was talking about their marriages, their children, the life they had built. I found myself surrounded by people who talked about schools, family vacations, and homes. I couldn't help thinking that everyone had rushed too much. Maybe no one had taken advantage of their youth. Why did everyone seem content with such a monotonous life? I felt out of place, as if I were in a world I didn't belong to, until I saw Matthew. He entered the place with a woman at his side and a little girl holding his hand. I was left breathless. For a second, it felt surreal. It had been so long since I last saw him that for a moment I felt like I was seeing a stranger. But he wasn't. He was my lifelong best friend, the man I had loved the most, the same person I had betrayed and who never spoke to me again. He looked amazing, more mature, more confident, with that calm and happy expression I had once known. His wife was saying something in his ear, and he smiled, leaning slightly to give her a quick kiss on the cheek. Then he turned to the group and began to greet everyone with the same naturalness he always had, laughing as he introduced his wife to the others. I stayed where I was, watching from a distance, feeling strange. I didn't know whether I should approach or not, but in the end I decided that if he wanted to greet me, he would. It was then that I noticed the little girl running from one side to the other, greeting everyone with that childlike energy that makes everyone adore her. People commented on how well-behaved she was, how sweet, and then she came up to me. "Hello," she said with a big smile, catching me by surprise. "Hello," I replied with the best smile I could fake. "Did you also study with my dad?" I nodded. "Yes, we were very good friends." The girl lit up even more. "How cool," she said excitedly. "You know what? In 2 weeks, my parents are taking me to Disney because I got very good grades." I didn't know what to say. The girl was proud and happy. She had both her parents who clearly loved her and were giving her the best possible life. And there I was, listening to her talk about a world that could have once been mine, but that I let go by my own decision. Before I could answer, someone called her name, and she ran off. Then Matthew and his wife approached the group where I was. My heart raced. I didn't know what to expect. Would he ignore me? Would he act like he didn't know me? But he didn't. He looked at me for a brief moment with the same kind but distant expression he had with all the others. "I hope everything is going well for you," he said in a neutral tone. "Yes," I murmured politely. Matthew simply introduced his wife with a casual gesture. Before I could try to say something else, he said goodbye, saying they had planned to go to the movies and had only stopped by to say hello. I watched him leave the place with his wife holding hands and his daughter running ahead of them. I was paralyzed. And there, in the middle of all those people with their seemingly perfect lives, I felt like something inside me broke. A feeling of injustice took hold of me. That life should have been mine. I should have been the woman at his side. I should have been the mother of his daughter. But at the same time, I knew the truth. I had that opportunity and I wasted it. That day, that feeling has only grown in me. I have realized things I didn't want to see before. For example, lately when we go out to bars, men no longer approach us like they used to. I see my friends trying to flirt with younger guys who barely pay attention to them. And when they complain that men have changed, that they don't know how to court a woman anymore, I just listen in silence. Then, just 2 days ago, something finally opened my eyes. I went to see one of my casual hookups. He's not someone I especially like. He's simply a person I meet from time to pass the time. but while we were talking, the words came out of my mouth without thinking too much. "Don't you think we could try to have something more serious?" The silence that followed was uncomfortable. He looked at me surprised, as if he had never considered the idea. "I don't know," he responded after a few seconds. "What I like about this is that there are no demands. We see each other when we want, without ties." I knew at that moment I had made a mistake. We talked a little more, but his discomfort was evident. Yesterday I received a message from him telling me it was better to stop seeing each other, that everything was getting too complicated. And now I'm here, sitting in front of my computer after a long day of working alone, writing this. I don't want anything. I don't want advice. I don't want support or criticism. I just want to get this out. I know that when I finish writing, I will close the computer, I will take a shower, I will lie down in bed, and I will cry like I have done every night lately. But I hope this helps someone, because honestly, I don't know how much more I can bear this emptiness.